Right. Okay. So, hello and welcome to the Gamers Beat Sorry, I'll start again. Boo. Hello and welcome to the Gamers Beat Cancer panel for EGX Digital 2020. My name is Stephen Bracewell and I'm the director and founder of Gamers Beat Cancer. Today, I'm joined with part of my team from Gamers Beat Cancer to talk about the effects that gaming have on the mental health side of cancer patients. I'm joined by Catherine Nibbs, Ben Nichols, Harvey Toadface, and Dr. David Tully. First of all, my life was changed last year in March 2019. I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. Obviously, the news from my angle being a patient was devastating. Gaming has always provided me a release of escapism from a very early age. And I didn't start to realize how much I would rely upon gaming during my battle with cancer over a period of 5 months. Upon the day upon diagnosis, my wife, amazing that she is, decided that it was time for me to be able to stay in touch with my gaming friends because having a PC, taking that into the hospital would not have been an ideal scenario. So I needed to find a solution that was portable at the time that also helped me remain in touch with those people that would support me through my cancer journey. I found that gaming, like I said, is a massive release. And the fact was that during treatments with chemotherapy, was obviously a great part of my healing process through my cancer journey, playing obviously Mario Kart, Legend of Zelda, and many other exciting games with my friends online, gave me a chance of hope and a bit of normality in the darkest of days. Now, obviously, my cancer treatments were very, very rough. Within my first sort of cycle of chemotherapy, I unfortunately ended up in ICU, and the fact that I could hold on to the hope that I could still escape into a virtual world, of a better term, was an absolute lifesaver. And whilst during those crucial times, obviously bringing me back to a good, healthy state, gaming was obviously very integral. The work of Gamers Beat Cancer work with cancer communities currently nationally across the United Kingdom. We have started to build bridges within the United States as well with other cancer charity partnerships. The whole point of Gamers Give Back is the gift of gaming. To receive a gift or something like that in your darkest of hours is certainly a form of escapism for everybody. We have numerous projects throughout the year, and it's crucial that the industry start to realize that gaming obviously has many more applications outside of the realms of just playing games. It's a form of a social experience, but for cancer patients, it creates a lifeline for them. I'm talking to you today as a patient, as a first-hand experience of that journey that I took. Obviously, conventional therapy and obviously the treatments that we receive are still a crucial part, but I start to believe that looking at the idea that gaming could prove a very, very intricate part of the recovery. Gamers Beat Cancer was the concept. It came together in about my third cycle. And obviously from there, I've built an amazing team of people around me. And obviously it's very, very important that obviously people get behind this cause. There's nothing like this at the moment. And we're trying to change the face, obviously, on cancer itself and using this alongside traditional treatments as well. On that note, I'll hand you over to Ben Nichols. Ben Nichols has been a caregiver and will be able to give you more insight of how it looks from a caregiver to a person dealing with cancer.
Steve, yeah, I think from my point of view, as I was a carer for my husband, Steve, you were lucky in that you are still here. My husband, unfortunately, isn't. He passed away in January 2018. He suffered from esophageal cancer. And it's one of those cancers that is very, is just diagnosed very late because it presents itself in different ways. He went and had treatment for acid reflux. With him being 33 at the time, that sort of cancer isn't really something that it's usually associated with people a lot older. So they gave him tablets for acid reflux, as I mentioned. When he finally was diagnosed, it had gone spread to his liver, started chemotherapy straight away, and that was about August 2017. And in January 2018, he succumbed and passed away. We were married for just less than 4 weeks. 2 days before the wedding, we found out that he was terminally ill, and so went through the wedding knowing that that was pretty much the last time that we were a couple that we would say goodbye. When you have a loved one who is going through that trauma, you kind of have to set yourself aside. You kind of have to be carer, you have to be supporter, you have to be the be all and end all, which doesn't leave you enough room to, doesn't leave you a lot of space for yourself. And I found that really difficult. One of the things that I kind of thank is I had a 3DS and I played through so between the wedding and before he was taken away to hospice to then pass away, I played through Bravely Default, which is a Japanese role-playing game on the 3DS, and I was just completely absorbed in that because I had to sit beside his bed and watch him pass away. I needed an escape. I absolutely needed an escape. And that was the only thing I had at the time. It was basically a lifeline to make sure that I was still sane at the end of it. It really was. And even after, when he passed, I then went, as you did as well, I went and bought a Switch, I played Zelda, Mario Kart, I then got absorbed into loads of PS4 games. And it was kind of like a bit of therapy, really. It kind of gave me, distracted my consciousness, so my subconscious was allowed myself to deal with that process. I've kind of dealt with it. That's kind of my process, essentially, is just to distract myself while my subconscious deals with it. I had another traumatic event going back about 3 years prior, and that was flooded in 2015. And I did the same thing then, but this was a more traumatic event, and I needed something that would allow me to escape and deal with that trauma that as it was happening. I was still there for Paul, who was my husband's name. I was still there for him at the time, but doing something like playing my 3DS, which is portable, I could then take it to the hospital appointments, be beside his bed while he's sleeping. I could turn it on, I'd, distract myself instead of sat there just staring. It definitely allowed me to come back as myself as well. And that's what I wanted to help out with Gamers Beat Cancer. I wanted to Steve's come at this from a patient's point of view. I've come at this from my point of view, and that there isn't much there for people whose loved ones are passing away. And I think gaming would not only help those with people who are going through cancer treatments and experiencing the disease, it would also help people with whose loved ones are going through that. And essentially it might then help them connect in a way that they're not connected before or not able to connect now, by distracting them from what's going on at the time. So yeah, that's why I'm involved, why I got involved with this, and that's basically my story.
Okay, so my name's Andrew. I'm also known as Harvey Toadface Online. I'm a Twitch streamer and charity fundraiser. So my role is I'm on the board of advisors with Gamers Beat Cancer, and my primary role within the organisation is to organise and run various online gaming and streaming related events. We've hosted a couple of events in our young existence so far, and we have big plans to host many more events in the future, both virtually and hopefully physically in the future once the COVID situation's passed. So I'll go into a bit of a background about me. I've not suffered from cancer. I've not had a loved one suffer from cancer, thankfully. I've come into this from finding Stephen through Twitter and about my fundraising efforts. So I started streaming on Twitch about 3.5 years ago, primarily as a hobby. It was at the back end of 2017, I think it was. I hosted my first charity stream, which was to supplement my Movember efforts to raise money for Movember, and it went down really well. So from then it kind of developed to become an annual 24-hour charity stream, and then the next year I raised over £1,000 in a 24-hour period. Then it was at that point I kind of realised that I could use my stream and what and my platform to raise a lot more money for good causes. And that's what I want to do. To date, I'm well over £5,000 raised in the 3 years or so of streaming for good causes, and I'm hoping in the coming years that will skyrocket even more. This has led to me doing more than just a 24-hour charity stream. I've hosted tournaments in various games, including Apex Legends, PUBG, and Rocket League. Now, the main thing I found when hosting these tournaments is how welcoming each game community is to these sorts of events. Every time I've reached out to get players and participants and people to donate, the community has all been really welcoming. And I think it's a really powerful thing to highlight about the gaming community. So I'm going to just quickly touch on why the work Gamers Beat Cancer are trying to do is really important from my point of view and why it's so vital. So many people who attend EGX, well, all people who attend EGX will love gaming. And a lot of the people who attend will have met friends through games, not met them in real life and just know them virtually. And I'm sure some of you guys will have met people at these events for the first time. I know I've met various people I've met online at these events, and I count them as good friends, and I hope to meet many more in the future. And I think the reason I'm highlighting this is because it shows the power of gaming more from a social aspect than just the actual games themselves. In these times of COVID, we've all had to reduce our social interactions. And I don't know about you guys, but during the lockdown days, I played a lot of games because there wasn't really anything else to do. But it also really highlighted how powerful gaming is as a social interaction tool. And I don't really think I'd have kept as sane as I did through the lockdown period without gaming. So now, I've been fortunate I wasn't at high risk, I didn't need to shield. Obviously, many people suffering cancer who are going through treatments, and even those some who were in remission, were deemed high risk and had to shield, which meant they had 0 interactions for 3-4 months. And I can't imagine how that would be without having gaming there to help me through that. And I think that's one of the things that Gamers Beat Cancer is trying to bring to everyone. Through their Gamers Give Back scheme, the idea is try to get gaming hardware to cancer patients stuck on wards or stuck in their homes isolating, giving them not just the escape through a good game, but also giving them the opportunity to have social interaction still whilst not being able to leave the house. And through hearing stories of people like Stephen and Bennett, it makes me realise how necessary this sort of outreach is needed. Once the COVID situation has passed and life goes back to normal and people carry on going out again, people may forget about the times where they couldn't go out. But in that time, there'll still be cancer patients who have to stay at home. And Gamers Beat Cancer is going to help as many of these people as possible through their toughest of times, through the power of gaming. So that's my main reason of being involved with Gamers Beat Cancer. My responsibilities, as I said before, will surround the online space. So over the coming months and years, we're going to host more charity streams, we're going to host more tournaments, and ultimately we're going to get games in front of more people whose lives will improve because of it. But I can't do that alone, and none of us here can do that alone. If you're a streamer and want to host a charity stream, if you have an old console that you could donate to us, reach out to us. I know that Games Beat Cancer are going to do a hell of a lot of good for a hell of a lot of people over the coming years. I hope I could play my small role in aiding that, and I hope that some of you people will be joining me at some point too. I'm now going to pass you over to Kath, who's going to go into more detail about the impact of the diagnosis and research into gaming being a valuable tool in the recovery process.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'm Kath Nibbs. I am a child and adult trauma psychotherapist, which means that through my practice, I've seen many variations of illnesses that are terminal, as well as ones that don't result in that outcome. I'm also a clinical and academic researcher. I'm an author, and I am really interested in gaming and tech in therapy. I actually use games with my child and adult psychotherapy clients. That makes me one of very few female therapists in this country who actually does this. I'm also a podcaster, and because of that little bit of background, one of the things I'm going to do is talk a little bit about gaming and mental health, particularly in the circumstances of cancer in terms of the diagnosis, prognosis, interventions and recovery. But it means that I can also ask Stephen and Ben and Andrew and David questions as we go throughout this panel because obviously we're not doing this live, so we're not going to see the audience participation in the way that we normally would do on a panel. So just to give you a little bit of background, I've been interested in what we do online and why it has such an impact on us in basically our human development. And one of the things that has come to the forefront in much of the research and my writings is how much being in a world of gaming is facilitative to social interaction. And given that we're talking about COVID-19 and people being in lockdown, one of the things that has happened for many people with the diagnosis of cancer is it's meant that they've had to shield, which has that added layer of isolation, which doesn't necessarily mean a lot to people without these kind of diagnoses. So what this actually means is it's very, very frightening for people with cancer to have to stay isolated beyond the normal remits that most of us have to. So where some of us have been allowed to go out shopping, people who have a very vulnerable immune system, such as those with cancer, haven't been able to do this. So one of the bonuses is really being able to have that connection with people in a way that engages you with fun. And as Steve and Ben talked about, the kind of games that they played meant that during their healing process, and with Ben around his supportive supportive process to his partner, that what this actually meant is you had that facility to be able to kind of connect with other people. So research often shows that isolation is one of the biggest, if we like, destructive impacts on mental health, which is why COVID-19 has been such a crisis. But imagine for one moment that you are sat in a hospital and you have a diagnosis, and you could be a child or an adult, and that diagnosis now means that you can't be around your friends, your family physically. So what this actually means is that we need to have a system where we can support these patients, these children, these clients in a way that allows for this connection to still take place. Now, both Stephen and Ben talked about the portability. So you've probably quickly picked up that we were talking, or they were talking, should I say, about Nintendo Switches, the 3DS, and actually how this meant that you could actually have technology within your lap. We also know that laptops could be available, but right now they don't tend to be as cheap as it is for people to go out and purchase these items. So again, that kind of lends itself to the remit of what Gamers Beat Cancer is all about. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to ask a few questions of Stephen and Ben, if you don't mind, in terms of when you were gaming, Steve, what did it allow you to do in terms of managing the diagnosis, how you were feeling, and the fact that your wife was able to go and get you something that provided you with this companionship to your friends online?
Yeah, it provided a form of escapism. What it did though as well, it gave me chance to get into an area whilst gaming. I could help obviously process those emotions, not suppress them, but being able to process them better through a game whilst talking with my friends, because obviously having that connection with them, being able to use obviously functionalities like Discords and Nintendo chats, I was able to talk to them, and they were just able to help me make myself feel better. And I think by gaming and that escapism, that the doctors there always believe that when you're fighting such a disease as cancer, if your mind is healthy, it can also help the body as well heal at a certain level, whether it be hearsay or not being able to prove scientifically. A positive and healthy mind can also help result in an equally healthy body, which is what you need to fight cancer.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll give a quick interpretation there. So cancer diagnoses, a lot of the interventions are actually really traumatic. So to give you one line from the science, the way that we heal trauma is through relationships. So one of the things that you were able to do is continue those relationships in a virtual space. And also one of the things that you've reflected there, Steve, is the feeling of managing your mental health and those positive emotions, which also is supported by science and research as, again, a facilitative mechanism for healing. So I'm just thinking about what was the hospital reaction like in terms of, you know, your wife disappearing off one day and bringing in this thing that you sat with and played on?
Yeah. To be quite honest, what it was, when I was diagnosed, I was called back in on the Friday, and I had to go in Friday evening, and I wasn't told anything. There was no information. What they'd done is taken a bone biopsy the day before, then released me home. But then there'd been an issue with the biopsy on the Friday when they phoned me back and said, you need to come back. I was kept completely in the dark. I didn't know what was going on. My wife and myself, we spoke to the consultant. We were brought, obviously she was in the room at the time, and a nurse assistant came in with the doctor and brought the news that I had AML, which is acute myeloid leukemia, which explains is an aggressive leukemia that affects the blood and bone marrow in a human being. From that, I did crack jokes about buying Nintendo Switch, saying, you know, I need some way to stay in touch, because I couldn't take an Xbox into hospital, even though there were the TVs there. I just needed something that was reliable and portable at the time. I did notice on the ward that I was on, there were other patients in similar situations that were gaming on a laptop, which they brought their own laptop and they were playing games like Sims. There was another gentleman who I think had brought in his PlayStation 4 even. But at the time, it was just, for me, it was just something portable, because obviously the Xbox had to remain at home because my wife needed her escapism. She certainly won't touch the gaming PC. So yeah, that is important, but it's a very cold, and unfortunately doctors have to be not emotionally attached to the patient, even though they want to be. And to be told that you've got a disease that's going to kill you if not treated correctly, yeah, there's no word to describe the feeling. It's just an empty void that you stare into after that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking actually the whole process, which we'll come to David with in a minute. So I will kind of hopefully wrap this up fairly soon. I'm just going to come to you, Ben, in terms of kind of the support that you have or haven't found. But what I'm hearing, Steve, is it sounds like that not only is Gamers Beat Cancer going to be this not-for-profit service that allows for people to have kit that they can play on in terms of, you know, donations that are made, but also in this whole process of being given a cancer diagnosis, we are talking about a ripple effect that isn't just about your leg is going to be fixed, it'll take 6 weeks. This is a really impending feeling of doom, and there's generally often no respawning. We are talking about, this is about a game, you know, the game of your life, and whether you level up, whether you actually succeed, is about that whole process in terms of the delivery of the news, the delivery of the prognosis, then the interventions, and all of that whole medical process of having chemicals, radiation, etc., etc.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, the one thing that that I learned through the experience of cancer is that as a cancer patient, you're given pamphlets and they say, oh, we can get you counselling, but you can only have counselling when you're not obviously immune suppressed, which during that time, you've only got the nurses and doctors to talk to, and the nurses try to make you feel better, but they don't understand you, they don't get you. Do you know what I mean? And when these therapy and counseling sessions, they should be intervening during the process, not after the process, because once the process is over, the damage is done. This way is about damage control.
yeah. So in terms of the support that you got, Ben, one of the things that I'm going to bring to the table here is this LGBTQI community, where, you know, conversations that we've had outside of this panel are, you know, cancer does not really give a hoot about colour, creed, or sexuality. And there's obviously within the LGBTQ community, the transition of gender can also have an effect, because people still have biological remnants of maybe the previous sex that they used to be, or the sex that they're going to be. That this can actually add that layer of complexity. So what support did you find in terms of LGBTQT, and how this process was for you?
I honestly didn't find anything. It was a complete desert of support for myself. I found quite quickly afterwards that I looked online and there were no specific support groups for my circumstance. There are cancer support groups out there, but they are for anyone to turn up. And being a gay man, I wanted a space that I felt safe in. I'm going there for support. I am feeling really emotional, really downtrodden, really vulnerable, and I wanted a safe space to be able to go to. And if I go to a space that I don't feel comfortable with, I wouldn't go. I just would not go. So when I had a look, there was no LGBT grief counselling groups. There was no cancer surviving groups. There was nothing there. Not even for people who are going through cancer. I didn't see any support groups or counselling groups or anything that could help people. I think I found one charity that offered that was a prostate cancer charity. They offered support, but that was it. There wasn't anything else at all.
So that sounds really difficult. And what was the hospice like? Did they have the facilities for, gaming so that people could find something to support their palliative care?
Yeah, the hospice itself, there were a lot of patients who were elderly, and you don't find a lot of elderly gamers. So Paul was in a private room. It was the only room that was available at the time, and there wasn't a television there. There was just basically some wardrobes, the bed. I think there was a chest of drawers as well, I think. And that was it, really. There wasn't anything that he could use. I mean, at that point in time, he was just drifting in and out of consciousness. There wasn't anything that he could use to game on, but I was there kind of with him for the whole time. So watching somebody drifting out of consciousness, not having anything to distract you from watching this person literally die in front of you, that was traumatic. And I had my 3DS with me, so I could actually play a game while he was asleep. So I wasn't there watching him die, essentially. I needed that escapism, and that's what my game console did. But in regards to the hospice, there wasn't anything there to distract away from what was happening. The staff, as Steve pointed out, were really nice, were really friendly. I think in that situation, a lot of people do find out, that they need to become very resilient. So they end up being really friendly to patients and patients' families. But there wasn't anything to distract away from that situation. You are in that situation. You can't look anywhere else. As Steve said, you're looking at this big black abyss of mortality, essentially. Because at that point, you are realizing that you are mortal. You go through life thinking you're immortal a lot of times. Death isn't something that we think about constantly, but in that point, you're there face to face with that mortality, and you need to be distracted away from that, because otherwise, you were going to fall into that abyss.
So this really is the impact of trauma. It's highly distressing for the family, for the person suffering, the patient, for the people around them. And actually, this is the whole premise of Gamers Beat Cancer, Stephen. And I know we've talked about this loads outside of what we're doing here, and the fact that the gaming community. So I'm just going to ask Andrew a minute. In terms of the gaming community, the camaraderie that it brings, have you kind of found that the charities that come towards you are from any of these terminal related issues?
In terms of the charities themselves, not many charities at all really know about the gaming space and know how to approach people in it. It's more the streamers and the creators who pick charities that are close to them. I think generally as a whole, sort of the gaming space is learning more about mental health and is being a lot more open to sort of accepts it as a thing that people need to try and keep on top on. It's okay to not be okay type of things as well. But generally charities as a whole struggle, apart from a few select charities, they do struggle to really enter this sort of the gaming space and know how to take advantage of it, really. And I think obviously during the COVID situation, basically every charity out there had to stop all their fundraising events, and there was this clamour for everything to start looking online, but you had a lot of people who had no idea on what they're trying to get into, trying to all of a sudden figure out how they're going to make up shortfalls of potentially millions of pounds of fundraising in a very short time. And I worked with Shine Cancer Support with one of the events I did with Games Beat Cancer, and I know from speaking to them, they're quite a small charity and they were really struggling to figure out how to enter that space as well. So having something like this will help a lot of charities that Games Beat Cancer work with be able to enter the space.
Okay, so in terms of what I'm really interested in, I'm looking at, you know, how we use technology to support people who have trauma, and obviously today talking about Gamers Beat Cancer, it's those people with cancer. So I'm going to kind of flick over to David now, who's been sitting really patiently and quietly, to kind of talk about the way that I've used particular technologies in therapy, such as VR, and you know the way that I could do gaming. That actually there is the potential here for gaming companies to team up, you know, hopefully with organizations and, you know, people like David and, you know, people like myself who work with children and adults going through these kind of traumas, that actually we could do something in a gamified way that reduces the fear, the terror, the unknown, that kind of stasis that you both mentioned, Ben and Stephen, about the diagnosis to the actual intervention, that there was this lag that you kind of had nothing to do. So, you know, I'm going to leave it to you, David, and then I'll probably come and ask you questions in terms of the VR and so on.
No, that's great. Basically everything that you mentioned then, and what Steve mentioned about the lag, so to speak, you know, what's going to happen. Well, I think, you know, virtual reality is a prime candidate to just tell the story, but more tell the story of, oh, it's normal to feel like this, or this is what's going to happen. It may not be 100% accurate, but it's 99% there. And I think that's the idea of getting behind virtual reality to train people. So I'm from an academic background. So previously spent the last 4 years at Liverpool John Moores as a senior lecturer, teaching games development using Unreal Engine, before that XNA and Monogame, and then just teaching the whole raft of game design, games programming, engine development. I left in January to start up my company, Scene Graph Studios, doing all things virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D modeling, but adding it, taking it from academia, from the whole, you know, gamification, and applying it to industry, applying it to construction, because I could see where Unreal Engine was going with it all for real-time visualization. And the fact that Unreal Engine, you know, obviously they're running off the bandwagon of Fortnite, the multi-billion pounds, so they're just giving away the technology basically for free. You know, go do some cool stuff, you invent it, you bring the ideas. And that's part of the reason why I really wanted to get involved in, you know, Gamers Beat Cancer. So I'm going to say this kind of once, you know, social media works. I seen a post that was shared by a mutual friend of mine and Steve's, Kevin Smith from Yonder Cloud. And I was like, yes, such a simple idea, give consoles, but, you know, I've got a few consoles, I use the consoles. What else could we give as a company? So, you know, reached out to Steve, said, look, how can we get involved? How can we support this? And we just got chatting about how to potentially in the future take some of these gamification ideas, virtual reality, and then create some kind of either therapy, either through like, you know, actual movement therapy, physical therapy, or just mental health and well-being. You know, let's just escape for a while. And I think that's what I was like really interested and, you know, really looking forward to just getting my hands stuck in. But it's such a big task, you know, as everyone knows, like, what type of therapy do you go for? Is it physical? How much physical? Because a lot of times, like, I don't know if anyone plays Beat Saber, one of the best VR games ever. Cool. But if you say to someone, hey, throw on Beat Saber, it's a big task. How about if they can't, you know, use the muscles, you know, chemotherapy, like struggles with quite a few things. You don't want to just say, yeah, I'll play Beat Saber. That's your therapy. It's not. It needs to be thought about from an academic point of view, but then also just getting people's opinions about it from just like very small parts. But it's such a big plan and it's such a big task to even tackle in the first place. But I think like this Gamers Beat Cancer team is, it's going to be very good. So, but yeah, that's where I kind of want to focus the time on, letting people go through the story just so they can experience just a little bit, and then they won't be as scared. Because even the fight before this, like Kathy was mentioning about, young children going to hospital, and even Ben, you mentioned about, now with COVID, you can't just go into hospital for meetings. You got to have, Zoom calls, Skype calls with the doctor first, then you got to go in, all the extra PPE protection. People are going to be scared, which understandably a lot of people are scared to go in the hospital. But if you can throw a VR headset on, especially a Quest where you don't need a PC, you don't need a laptop. A Quest is basically like free Nintendo DS's put on top of each other. You can throw it in a bag, plastic Testo carrier bag, take it with you, throw it on, and then people can just experience the space before they actually go into it, get the nerves down, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot coming at you. So that's where I think VR is going to be most powerful in these situations. So
yeah, I'm going to jump on that one for a second then, David, because one of the things that we talked about off camera was your background. So you've actually developed a program which could do a little bit of this. But first of all, just want to say good call on the Beat Saber there. And I'm thinking actually people who are immunocompromised, and I am going off on a slight tangent here, which happens a lot. So I did say this would happen, Steve, and I apologise.
So good.
People who are immunocompromised need to make sure that they're not exerting themselves too much, because if you raise the cortisol levels, actually it can have a negative impact. So obviously the right kind of VR programs. So sitting behind me, I've got my Oculus that I use with clients that's got a VR meditation app. So it's one of the first of its kind. And I know that there is an organization in the US that deals with Alzheimer's, patients with Alzheimer's, getting them to move about and do physical exercise. But what I'm not seeing is kind of what you designed with the simulation around radiographers. So do you want to just kind of explain what you've done there, so that we can talk about that empathy, the reduction in cortisol for people who are scared, but also the opposite side of it for the medical staff?
Yes, so we got approached by Birmingham City Uni through some contacts through Liverpool John Moores, and they wanted to develop a simulation, a VR simulation, a very small prototype that would basically keep nurses in radiotherapy, because there was a 60% drop-off rate. So nurses get trained, obviously NHS pay a lot of money, the government pay a lot of money, lots of time training to go into radiotherapy. But what they're not trained in is how to give bad news, how to deal with patients. And 60% of nurses just go find a different job. A lot of them go out of nursing altogether because it's just too much for them. So we wanted to build an application which would basically allow one person on the laptop to control the VR patient, but then the person in virtual reality to respond back to them. So again, it was only a very small prototype, but in short, it was an elderly lady who you knew her diagnosis, so you had the chart in front of you in VR, but then the person controlling it would just keep asking you questions. So it was a very set process, or not questions, sentences that they spoke out in virtual reality through custom mocap that we all did. But then there's a feedback loop. You could ask them questions such as, am I going to die? But then you can say it a lot more aggressively, less aggressively, and you just had to hear the response of the person in virtual reality. So it didn't go to actual testing due to COVID, so it's due to actually go to testing once everyone gets back into university. But from the next stage of that, what we went on to is to do an aggressive patient. So what they found was a lot of patients would need to drink a lot of water. So whenever they go get the scans, so they're waiting in the lobby for about an hour, bursting to go to the toilet. Well, if a nurse goes out and calls a patient in the wrong order, that can cause a lot of upset, because obviously people going, they want to get the test done, they're anxious, they also really need the toilet, which just adds to it. So we had an aggressive patient that would come out, walk over to you, look you at your VR eyes basically, and just start shouting at you through pre-scripts. But then the person controlling the PC could just ask you any other questions, pre-scripted questions, but then do it either aggressively, mild, and you've got to react to that. You can either be aggressive back, or you can just say, sorry, need to do this, this, and this. So it's that feedback of getting them through these multiple simulations. Even though that is only 2 simulations, it's just reacting back to them. And yeah, from people that we got to try it, they said, like, you know, it was weird how immersive it is, because it goes from sound. So we got some sounds of people just in an office, you know, doors slamming, people talking, or even just having the eyes of a VR character just look at you wherever you move. It's only subtle things. But yeah, so hopefully that would like pick up soon as COVID actually, you know, lets up, which is a bit depressing from that. But that's actually led us on to more of VR simulations. So we're working with a local company in Liverpool called Pathways to Work that are basically doing virtual reality interviews, that we're basically remaking what we've made for the nurse training, but apply it to interviews. So people who haven't been in jobs for 10 years, people who've been in prison, you know, they haven't had an interview. They can do the work, they just haven't had an interview, or they have interviews, they just don't have enough experience of talking to someone. So we want to use that replication of simulations, and we believe, like, yeah, VR is the future of training, but then also lots of other stuff with AR may come into it. But it is it's crazy how fast you can make a VR simulation using game engines such as Unreal Engine, which you know, I suppose like everyone knows Unreal Engine going through, especially if you EGX already into it, some of the best games made for it. And that's why we chose, even as a university 6 years ago, to go with Unreal Engine, because of how immersive it will be for the future. So yeah.
Great.
Okay, so to kind of finish up, I'm going to go with a hashtag that I kept using on my podcast, I think last year, which is gaming for good. So the potential here for, you know, the result of this panel in kind of what we're talking about in terms of cancer patients, their families, the whole process from, you know, testing all the way through to recovery, and healing for those who don't recover is pretty much the remit of Gamers Beat Cancer. So Steve, did you want to just see us out with what the future holds?
Sure. Well, I mean, the future holds is obviously we've got numerous projects that we're hopefully going to help change and shape the esports industry as well. We've also got software applications where we're working very closely with Dr. David Tully from SceneGraph. The Gamers Give Back project, though, is our main priority at the moment. There are families out there with some children that may not see the 19th birthday that need consoles. Our funds are only so deep. So rather than go and sell your console, why not actually give somebody the gift of gaming and help change a life out there? That is one of the particular hashtags that we're trying to get going, is hashtag the gift of gaming, because it is a priceless gaming. We've got so many exciting projects. This is something that I hope the industry will watch this and keep watching this space as we develop over the years, because we've got so much more to give and so much more to come. 1, 2, 3.
It's a great start.
Love it.